Mhm. Oh boy. Wait. Oh, you guys can't hear the right now on. The mute goes. There we go. I think everything should work. Yep, like the title says, Gen 6 doc. I wanted to read this whole thing. I don't know if I'll do it all on stream, but or at least reading this first bit. I'll probably read all of it on stream. I mean, yeah, I got some free time, so probably be good. But don't complain about it being boring or whatever. I don't care. Don't do it. You're not gonna peer pressure me out of it. Fuck. I was gonna try and have music in the background, but it might fucking distract me. Something a little more chill would be nice. Whatever. Frig it. We're going no music. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. There we go. Okay. So I was gonna read the full executive summary, but the executive summary is, like it says, just like a summary of everything in the report already. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna read the whole report anyway. So I don't know how much I'm like needing to read like the executive summary part. So I don't probably maybe I'll go back and like read the full summary, but I feel like going back and reading the summary would be better than trying to read the summary and then go through everything to me, but that might just be me. I don't know. But yeah. Anyway. Let's go with this. Jan 6 doc, in case nobody knows. Hold on. It was basically just a committee of people that was put together to investigate the it says it there in the full title of it, final report of the select committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the Capitol of the United States. So that's all it is. It's a committee of people. As far as I understand, it was a mostly Republican committee. I think they say it in one part here, because I read part of it in the executive summary. Remember, oops. Oh, fuck. No, I can't find it. Fuck, it's searching through this whole document, dude. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm looking for one thing. Well, I think you can find it somewhere. Oh, fuck, I read it. It was in the executive summary. I forget where exactly, but you get the idea. Jeez. It shows, yeah, committee staff. Contractors and consultants. Yeah. But you get, it's a whole thing. So yeah, going through this. Don't cry if you find it boring, okay? I'm just doing this because it's something I've been meaning to read through for a while. Okay, so we're at, I don't know if you would call this a chapter or a section. This is the first, yeah, I guess you'd say the section of this, the big lie. Late on election night 2020, President Donald J. Trump addressed the nation from the East Room at the White House. When Trump spoke at 2:21 a.m. on November 4th, the president's re-election was very much in doubt. Fox News, a conservative media outlet, had correctly called Arizona for former Vice President Joseph R. Biden. Every Republican presidential candidate since 1996 had won Arizona. If the president lost the state, and in the days ahead, it became clear that he had, then his campaign was in trouble. But as the votes continued to be counted, President Trump's apparent early lead in other key states he needed to win, steadily shrank. Soon, he would not be in the lead at all. He'd be losing. So the President of the United States did something he had planned to do long before Election Day. He lied. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country, President Trump said. We were getting ready to win this election. The president continued, frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election, Trump claimed, without offering any evidence that a major fraud was occurring in our nation. That's our first citation there. I'm guessing that's a video or something that you can probably check. Yeah. Neither of President Trump's claims were true. He had no basis for claiming victory or that fraud was taking place. Millions of votes still had not been counted. The states were simply tabulating the ballots cast by the American people. Trump's own campaign advisor told him to wait, that it was far too early to declare victory. As the evening progressed, President Trump called in his campaign team. President Trump called in his campaign team to discuss the results. Trump campaign manager William Stepien, other campaign experts advised him that the results of the election would not be known for some time, that he could not truthfully declare victory. Stepien was one of the few that, because the ballots were going to be counted for days, it was far too early to be making any proclamation about having won the election. Stepien told President Trump that his recommendation was to say, votes are still being counted, it's too early to call the race. Jason Miller, another senior Trump campaign advisor, told the Select Committee that he argued in conversations with Stepien and others that night against declaring victory at the same time as well because it was too early to say one way or the other who had won. Miller recalled recommending that we should not go to declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers. According to testimony received by the committee, the only advisor present who supported President Trump's inclination to declare victory was Rudy Giuliani, who, according to Miller, was definitely intoxicated that evening. President Trump's decision to declare victory falsely on election night and unlawfully to call the vote counting to stop was not a spontaneous decision. It was premeditated. The committee has assembled a range of evidence of President Trump's pre-planning or false declaration of victory. This includes multiple written communications on October 31st and November 3rd, 2020 to the White House by Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. This evidence demonstrates that Fitton was in direct contact with President Trump and understood that he would falsely declare victory on election night and call for the vote counting to stop. The evidence also includes an audio recording of President Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon, who said on October 31st, 2020 to a group of associates from China, and what Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory, but that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's a winner. The Democrats, more of our people, vote early. That count. The Democrats, more of our people, vote early, that count. They're voting mail, and so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner, so when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. Also, if Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier. No, because he's going to sit right there and say, they stole it. I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. He's not going to how easy. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit. Also, in advance of the election, Roger Stone, actually, I think you can also listen. I think there's a specific call, right? They said, the evidence also includes an audio creating President Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon, who said on October. This was a call, I believe. Steve Bannon. I believe this is was this Steve Bannon who, I feel like there was a video of somebody explaining this exact same thing. There's a couple different things with this. Let's see. Here it is. Although I forget what this audio is from. I can't remember if it's from a call or...
again thank our witnesses today. Mr. Caroline Edwards, Shay Moss, and her
explain it in the video.
years, and his own family. They have come forward and they have told the American people the truth. And for those of you who seem to think the evidence would be different if Republican leader McCarthy had not withdrawn his nominees from this committee, let me ask you this. Do you really think Bill Barr is such a delicate flower that he would wilt under cross-examination? Pat Cipollone, Eric Hirschman, Jeff Rosen, Richard Donahue, of course they aren't. None of our witnesses are. At one point in 2016, when he was first running for office, Donald Trump said this: "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters." That quote came to mind last week when audio from Trump advisor Steve Bannon surfaced from October 31st, 2020, just a few days before the presidential election. Let's listen.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's a winner. He's just going to say he's a winner. The Democrats, more of our people vote early that count. Theirs voted mail. And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of that. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. Also, if Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier. No, because he just sit right there and said they stole it. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
And of course, 4 days later, President Trump declared victory when his own campaign advisors told him he had absolute...
Yeah, so, yeah, that's the audio call I was thinking of. Yeah, that was essentially the thing I was thinking. Or not essentially, that was what I was thinking of. That's what I was talking about. Also, in advance of the election, Roger Stone, actually, man, I want to check these footnotes, but they're going to be like super far down, and I don't want to have to scroll all the way back. Actually, I can change this, can't I? Hold on. I want to see if I can find the footnote. It should be 6, right? 6. Okay.
Dave's Hot Chicken Bites. All right, Dave.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory. More of our people vote early the winner.
Yeah, this is...
So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm.
Yeah. Okay. What's it? 238. Wait. I think I was a little farther up. It's been that. Okay. I don't know why I thought 238. Also, in advance of the election, Roger Stone, another outside advisor to President Trump, made this statement: "I really do suspect it will be up in the air. When that happens, the key thing to do is to claim victory. Possession is 9 out of 10 of the... Possession is 9 out of 10... Or does you mean 9? Is this supposed to be 9/10? Possession is 9/10 of the law? No, we won. Fuck you. Sorry, over. We won. You're wrong. Fuck you." In the days after the election, the president's own campaign team told him he had lost and there was no evidence of significant fraud. When his campaign staff wouldn't tell him what he wanted to hear, President Trump replaced them with what Attorney General William Barr described as a clown car of individuals willing to promote various conspiracy theories. But Donald Trump was no passive consumer of these lies. He actively propagated them. Time and again, President Trump was informed that his election fraud claims were not true. He chose to spread them anyway. He did so even after they were legally tested and rejected in dozens of lawsuits. Not even the Electoral College's certification of former Vice President Biden's victory on December 14, 2020, stopped the president from lying. Throughout, the big lie remained central to President Trump's efforts to block the peaceful transfer of power on January 6, 2021. Okay. Yeah, I think the audio here is like a pretty damning part of the whole thing, and I have heard this audio before. Wait, am I spelling his name right? Steve Bannon? Yeah. Thinking as always, just trying to make sure I phrase things in my notes the best way possible. But yeah, and they know, because they say they're voting mail, and yeah, they're gonna have a natural disadvantage. They know the votes are gonna come in later. Yeah. Yeah. Just go with the full quote here. Because might as well just have it right in there. Whoops. Oh. Can I not copy to that exact, to this page at least? Man, it's annoying. Hold on. There should be a way I can copy to a page. Oops. How would I do that? Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can figure that out. Hmm. Mm-hmm. I think people say I'm not. I'm not seeing what I'm expecting to see. Well, this is not the most helpful. A text editor, such as a notepad. Just copy the PDF document and go to the page you want to link to. Right click anywhere on the page. I don't think that's right. That anywhere on the page doesn't. Is there really not a way to do that for a PDF? Just copy. Oh, nice. Oh my gosh. There should be a. Why is there not a way to do that? Okay, number page equal. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe it is just that. And number page equal okay, hold on, let me make sure it actually sends me to that. It's gonna take a minute to load. It should do it. I'm pretty, that sounds right, so it's probably good. We'll check back. Okay. Anyway. But yeah, essentially you can see that, like, Bannon knew what he was doing there. Or not Bannon. Well, Bannon probably knew a decent amount of that. But, I mean, Trump, like, he was going to declare victory no matter what, is essentially what's being said. And it seems like a lot of people knew that what was going to happen was that a lot of Trump people were going to vote first, and it was going to look like Trump was winning, but more Democrats were going to be voting mail-in, and then it was going to kind of start to shift a little bit as things went on. And it would still be a close election, but it was still going to look crazy to people when stuff started to switch once mail-in votes came in. So, yeah. Still waiting on that. Okay. But yeah, you can also see Roger Stone. Do you suspect it will be up in the air when that happens? The key thing to do is claim victory. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Oh, we won. Fuck you. Sorry, over. We won. You're wrong. Fuck you. Yeah. And this is, yeah, kind of going over the same thing. Like multiple people telling him. And I remember, because I read this in his federal indictment. Okay, whatever this. Look at me. Look at my homework. But they say a very similar thing, that Trump also knew. He was told by several people this was wrong. Pence, senior leaders in the Justice Department, national intelligence directors, cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency. I even forget it's all these people. The really important ones are like staffers on his campaign, because they would have like the most investment in getting him elected. So it's like, why would these guys be lying to you about this? Wouldn't they like feed into your bullshit or whatever? You know? Yeah, state legislators, yeah. Yeah, so yeah. That's the main thing. The main claim, yeah, Trump. You're right, Trump told by several people. Yeah. I'm supposed to put this camp. Okay. The big lie reflected deliberate exploitation of the red mirage. Trump's big lie on election night was based on simple differences in how Americans vote. In 2020, it was well known that Democrats were much more likely to vote via mail-in ballots than in person in 2020. On the other hand, Republicans generally preferred to vote in person on election day. In key swing states with I keep misspeaking. Not really. I'm like stuttering. In key swing states, that tight margin, why can't I speak? In key swing states with tight margins between the candidates, the election day votes would favor President Trump and disproportionately be counted first. Mail-in ballots, which would favor former Vice President Biden, would disproportionately be counted later. In some states, it would take days to process the remaining mail-in ballots. The timing of how votes are counted created the potential for what is known as a red mirage, or an illusion of a Republican red victory in the early stages of voting. or a vote counting, President Trump would appear to be in the lead on election night, but this was not the whole picture. Many mail-in votes for former Vice President Biden would not be counted on election day. Therefore, the actual winner would likely not be known on election night. The red mirage phenomenon was widely known prior to the 2020 presidential election. Chris Starwell was the head of the Fox News elections desk that correctly called Arizona for Biden. Starwell and his team tried to warn viewers of the red mirage. He testified that over the past 40 or 50 years, Americans have increasingly chose to vote by mail or early absentee, and that Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. In nearly every election, Starwell elaborated, Republicans win election day and Democrats win the early vote, and then you wait and start counting. It happens every time. President Trump's campaign team made sure that the president was briefed on the timing of vote tallying. Stepien, his campaign manager, told the select committee that President Trump was reminded on election day that the large numbers of mail-in ballots would still remain to be counted over the coming days. Stepien added that he personally reminded the president that while early returns may be favorable, the counting would continue. I recounted back to 2016 when I had a very similar conversation with him on election day. I recounted back to the conversation with him in which I said, just like I said in 2016, it was going to be a long night. I told him in 2020 that, it was going to be a process again. As you know, the early returns are going to be positive. Then we're going to, be watching the returns of ballots as, they rolled in thereafter. Ordinarily, the red mirage anomaly does not create problems in the election process because candidates wait for the votes to be tallied before declaring victory or conceding, as Starwell emphasized. As Starwell emphasized, prior to President Trump, no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system. President Trump, however, made a big different choice. I don't know why I said big different. In an extraordinary breach of the American democratic process, he decided to exploit the potential for confusion about the staggered timing of the vote counting to deceive the American public about the election results. He and his allies foreshadowed this decision in their statements in the month leading up to the November 2020 election. So, red mirage, big thing. Lots of people understand. And they went with a guy from Fox just to try and show not being biased here. This is something that even Republican pundits, this isn't even an election or an elected official. This is a pundit. This is somebody who just talks about politics on a show. Even this guy is saying, this is a thing that happens. It's normal. Starwalt 11. I'm going to see if I can find this right quick. Actually, I should have seen. Whoops. Too far. I just wanted to see if I could find that footnote. So that would be a good thing to say. Starwalt. So what Starwalt? Starwalt. Something Starwalt, whatever. Or was he a pundit? I'm saying he's a pundit. He was somebody who worked at Fox News, which is a news organization. But my point was, this guy isn't even an elected official. This guy is also somebody who would have a vested interest in Trump winning, right? Having Trump be a big winner for the election would be a pretty big thing. So him lying, I guess essentially my point was just that wouldn't, he would want Trump to win. So why he wouldn't lie about this red mirage thing? This is the thing that happens. This is the thing we recognize. And again, there are other people who say this. I know there is a clip I've seen is from not Biden, Bernie Sanders, who talks about a similar thing, that there's going to be a bunch of votes that come in. People are going to be like, oh shit, the Republicans are winning. It's going to be a fucking landslide. And then you're going to see a bunch of other votes come in because Democrats tend to vote more mail in. So it's going to they're going to kind of creep their way in a little bit because things are going to, it'll stagger in. I think like the report itself said, like it'll have this staggered effect. There's a Fox News elections. $224. Okay, hold on. I'll come back to that. Oops. Oh, I think that also did open a page 22. So I think that's the key for that. Select committee to investigate attack. Okay, it was just a hearing. Okay, it sounds like this is testimony he made. Or it looks like this is testimony he made at one of these hearings. Yeah. It's Chris Starwolt. It's foreseeable, I don't know. Foresee. Oh, because 4 has an E in it. Whatever. No biggie. That was 222 this time. Not 222, 224, whatever. President Trump. Oh, no, that's the part I just read. Trump's pre-election plans to declare victory. On Halloween, advisor Steve Bannon, who had served 4 years early as Donald Trump's 2016 campaign manager, laid out the election night plan. What Trump's going to do is declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory, but that doesn't mean he's a winner. Bannon told a private audience he's just going to say he's a winner. Bannon explained that the Democrats would have a natural disadvantage on election night because more Democrats would vote by mail-in than Republican, and it would take time to count the mail-in ballots. This would give President Trump the illusion of a lead, and Trump's going to take advantage of it, Bannon said. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. In an interview on Fox News in the morning of the election, Bannon insisted that President Trump needed to address the nation that night to provide the narrative engine for how we would go forward. During an episode of his podcast later that same day, Bannon clarified what he meant. President Trump is going to claim victory, right? He's going to claim victory. Tom Fitton drafted a victory statement for the president to read on election night. On October 31st, he emailed the statement to the President Trump's assistant, Molly Michael, and social media guru Dan Scavino. Fitton wrote that election day, November 3rd, was the deadline by which voters in states across the country must choose a president. Fitton argued that counting ballots that arrived after Election Day would be part of an effort by partisans to overturn the election results. Of course, that claim wasn't true. Mail-in ballots are regularly processed after Election Day. Regardless, Fitton encouraged the president to preemptively declare victory. We had an Election Day, and I won, Fitton wrote for President Trump. Early in the evening on Election Day, Fitton emailed Michael again to say he had just talked to him, President Trump, about the draft statement. Later that evening, before President Trump made his election night remarks, Michael replied that she was redelivering to him, President Trump, now. Roger Stone, President Trump's longtime political confidant, told several associates just prior to the election that Trump needed to declare victory, especially if the race wasn't called on Election Day. Let's just hope we are celebrating on Election Night, Stone said. I really do suspect it will be up in the air. When that happens, the key thing to do is claim victory. Stone elaborated with colorful language. Possession is 9/10 of the law. No, we won. Fuck you. Sorry. Over. We won. You're wrong. Fuck you. Indeed, published reports echoed these warnings about President Trump's election strategy. 2 days before election, Jonathan Swan of Axios reported that President Trump has told confidants that he will declare victory on Tuesday night if it looks like he's ahead. Swan added that Trump's team is preparing to falsely claim that mail-in ballots counted after November 3rd, a legitimate count expected to favor Democrats, are evidence of election fraud. If the vote tally swung against Trump after election night in states such as Pennsylvania, then Trump team would claim the Democrats had stolen the election. Fox News election analyst Chris Stirewalt testified that he and his team had gone to pains to inform viewers that the early votes would favor Republicans, but that the lead would be illusory because the Trump campaign and the president made it clear that they were going to try to exploit this anomaly. Others warned that President Trump would exploit the red mirage as well. 29. I wonder what that is. 28. Fox News, yeah, that's for Christopher. I wonder what 29 is. Others warned. They're probably actually be an interesting thing. But yeah, this is just like further enforcing like this is a normal thing. People knew this was going to happen. People who wanted Trump to win knew this was going to happen. People knew this was going to happen. The only people who didn't know this were just like people who just didn't know how stuff worked, according to this. But it seems to be the case. 227, let's check that. Footnote 29. Bloomberg. Oh, this is the Axios thing. Gotcha. Okay. Trump. Oh, hold on, I need some water. What will we want? Okay. Trump's pre-election efforts to delegitimize the election process. President Trump also paved the way for his false election night declaration of victory by blanketing voters with a blizzard of lies and statements, delegitimizing mail-in voting in the middle of a deadly pandemic and consistently questioning the security of ballots. President Trump used the president's bully pulpit, including his heavily trafficked Twitter feed, to tell one lie after another. The Select Committee found dozens of instances in which President Trump claimed that mail-in voting would produce a rigged election. Trump repeatedly denounced mail-in voting on Twitter during interviews and even during the presidential debate. Here is a small sample of President Trump's attempts to delegitimize mail-in balloting. On April 7, 2020, President Trump claimed, "Mail ballots are very dangerous. It's a Trump sentence. Let me slow down. Mail ballots are a very dangerous thing for this country because they're cheaters. They go and collect them. They're fraudulent in many cases. These mailed ballots come in. The mailed ballots are corrupt. In my opinion, they collect them. And they collect them and they get people to go in and sign them. And then they're forgeries in many cases. It's a horrible thing." The following day, April 8th, President Trump tweeted, "Republicans should fight very hard when it comes to statewide mail-in voting. Democrats are clamoring for it. Tremendous potential for voter fraud, and for whatever reasons, doesn't work out well for Republicans." At Fox and Friends. May 24th, the United States cannot have all mail-in ballots. It will be the greatest rigged election in history. People grab them from mailboxes, print thousands of forgeries, and force people to sign them. Also forge names, some absentee okay when necessary, trying to use COVID for this scam. September 17th, ripe for foreign interference. At True the Vote, there is a group of people, largely radical left Democrats, that want election mayhem. States must end this crazy mass sending of ballots. Also a gift to foreign interference into our election. Stop it now before it is too late. Before the election, as President Trump campaigned against mail-in voting, Bill Stepien sought an intercession along with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Stepien attempted to convince the president that mail-in voting was not a bad thing for his campaign. They argued that President Trump's decision to discourage mail-in voting while urging his voters to vote only on election days leaves a lot to chance and would fail to take advantage of a superior grassroots operation that could encourage Trump voters to return to their ballots. President Trump did not heed their warning. He continued to demonize mail-in voting. Red mirage was a key part of his big lie. Ominously, President Trump consistently refused to commit to attempt to accepting the outcome of the election. During an interview on Fox News in July, Chris Wallace asked, "Can you give a direct answer if you will accept the election?" President Trump responded, "I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either." On September 23rd, 2020, on September 23rd, 2020, a reporter asked President Trump if he would commit to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. The president refused, saying, "We're going to see what happens." The president claimed the ballots are a disaster, adding that if he could get rid of the ballots, we'll have a very peaceful, there won't be a transfer. Frankly, there will be a continuation. That is, according to President Trump, there would be a continuation of his presidency. The following day, September 24th, another reporter followed up by asking if the election would be legitimate only if President Trump won. The president again suggested that something was suspect about mail-in ballots, adding that he was not sure the election could be an honest one. Yeah, so that's the whole thing here, is essentially just saying Trump continually tried to delegitimize mail-in ballots. Fuck. Why can't I spell shit? Yeah, McCarthy was going to do that. So I guess. I don't know how to spell delegitimize. Delegitimize. Oops. Was, what do I put? Number page, then something else. Number page equals number page equals okay. President Trump's launch of the big lie, consistent with pre-election narrative planted by President Trump. Within hours of polls closing, President Trump began pushing the claim that late reported vote tallies were illegitimate, even though he had been reminded of his campaign manager that the very day that a large number of mail-in ballots would not be counted for several hours or days. President Trump claimed that Democrats were going to find ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. He also suggested that Democrats were continuing to vote after the polls had closed. Indeed, this is exactly what Steve Bannon described when he said President Trump would take advantage of the Democrats' natural disadvantage on election night. In the ensuing days and weeks, President Trump often referred to dumps of election votes, dumps of votes that were injected into the counting process. His supporters latched onto these false claims. There were no dumps of votes, just tallies of absentee ballots as they were reported by jurisdictions throughout the country in a fully transparent process. These batches of ballots included votes for President Trump and Biden. The late reported votes favored the former vice president, just as President Trump's campaign advisors said they would, particularly in primarily Democratic cities. Attorney General Bill Barr recognized immediately that the red mirage was the basis for Trump's erroneous claim of fraud. Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway, Barr said. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. President Trump's claims seemed to be based on the dynamic that, at the end of the evening, a lot of Democrat votes came in which changed the vote counts in certain states, and that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. President Trump knew about the red mirage. He chose to lie about it repeatedly, even after being directly informed that his claims were false. This was often the case in the post-election period. The president consciously disregarded facts that did not support the big lie. Post-election, President Trump replaces his campaign team. President Trump's campaign leadership, including Bill Stepien, the campaign's manager, and Justin Clark, the campaign's deputy manager, supported President Trump and were willing to pursue recounts and other standard post-election litigation, but they were not willing to promote baseless conspiracy theories. Stepien and others characterized this group as Team Normal. Less than 2 weeks after the election, President Trump pushed Team Normal aside because its members didn't tell him what he wanted to hear. In their place, Trump promoted Rudy Giuliani and his associates, men and women who spread baseless, extreme claims of election fraud. Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, recruited several investigations and lawyers to assist him. Giuliani's team included Jenna Ellis, Bernard Kerik, Boris Epstein, Catherine Fries, and Christina Bobb. Ellis functioned as Giuliani's deputy on the new Trump campaign legal team. Kerik, the former commissioner of the New York Police Department and a pardoned felon, served as Giuliani's chief investigator. Other attorneys who collaborated with Giuliani's legal team included Sidney Powell, Cleta Mitchell, and John Eastman. As discussed elsewhere in this report, Eastman became a key player in President Trump's efforts to overturn the election. So, yeah, probably write that in. Trump. Let's see this. Bill Stepien, Justin Clark. Should I write these point parts down? I don't know if it's necessary. That might make more sense to do. No, I feel like it makes sense because it's all pretty close, pretty bunched together. So I don't know if it's necessary. It's probably fine. I think that's fine. I don't think I need to write the point thing. 1.5, 1. Yeah. Okay. I always fuck up Eastman's name. Is it Jack Eastman? John Eastman. I don't know why. I always think it's Jack Eastman. Yeah. Excuse me. President Trump's campaign team told him he lost the election and there was no significant fraud. President Trump's campaign team quickly realized that none of the significant fraud claims were real. Bill Stepien testified that as of November 5th, the Trump campaign had not found any proof of fraudulent activity. There were allegations and reports, but nothing hard and fast that drew the results of the election into question. The Trump campaign continued to investigate claims of fraud into the second week after the election. According to Stepien, as people shared wild allegations with the president, the campaign team was forced to review the facts, then serve as truth-telling squad to the president regarding why claims didn't prove to be true. For example, Stepien recalled someone alleging that thousands of illegal votes had been cast in Arizona. That wasn't true. The votes had been submitted by overseas voters, such as military deployed or stationed abroad, who are obviously eligible to participate in the election. Alex Cannon was a lawyer for the Trump campaign. Oh, excuse me. Oh, Jesus. Alex Cannon was a lawyer for the Trump campaign and previously worked for the Trump Organization. After the election, Cannon was tasked with looking into allegations of voter fraud in the 2020 election, including the claim that thousands of ineligible votes had been cast in Arizona. Cannon recalled that the Vice President Pence asked him what he was finding, and I said that I didn't believe we were finding it, or I was not personally finding anything sufficient to alter the results of the election. Cannon responded. Vice President Pence thanked him. Cannon reported his assessment to Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, as well, in mid to late November 2020. Meadows asked Cannon what his investigation had turned up, and I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states. Cannon told Meadows, there's no there, Meadows replied. Jason Miller, a senior advisor to Trump campaign, pushed claims of election fraud in public and private. However, Miller says that he told President Trump a different story, informing him numerous times that there was not enough election fraud to have changed the election. Miller, my understanding is that I think there are still very valid questions concerned with rules that were changed under the guise of COVID, but specific to election day fraud and irregularities, there were not enough to overturn the election. Committee staff. Sorry, I shouldn't read that. You know, it says it right there. And did you give your opinion on that to the president? Yes. What was his reaction when you told him that? You haven't seen or heard. I'm paraphrasing, but you haven't seen or heard all the different concerns and questions that have been raised. How many times did you have this conversation with the president? Several. I couldn't put a specific number on it, though. But more than one? Correct. Matthew Morgan, the Trump campaign's top lawyer, came to a similar conclusion. Nearly 2 months after the election on January 2nd, Morgan met with the vice president's staff. According to Morgan, the consensus in the room was that even if all the claims of fraud and irregularities were aggregated and read most favorably to the campaign, it was not sufficient to be outcome determinative. As far as the Trump campaign's professional leadership was concerned, there was no evidence that the election had been stolen from President Trump. To the contrary, they had seen ample evidence that President Trump simply lost and told the president so. On November 6th, Jared Kushner arranged for the senior campaign staff to brief President Trump in the Oval Office on the state of the race. Since Election Day, Matt Oksuzowski, the campaign's leading data expert, had tracked voting returns in the swing states to analyze the campaign's odds of success. Miller texted such updates on data from key states to Meadows. The Trump campaign's data did not add up to victory. Oksuzowski, I don't know how to pronounce that name, delivered to the president in pretty blunt terms that he was going to lose the election. There were not enough outstanding votes in the battleground states for President Trump to overcome Biden's lead. President Trump disagreed and insisted that he would still prevail prevailed through legal challenges, but the data did not lie. On November 7th, fucking hell. On November 7th, the Associated Press called Pennsylvania and the overall presidential election for former Vice President Biden. At that point, a small team of the president's campaign advisor, included Stepien, met with the president and told him that his path to victory was virtually non-existent. The campaign team conveyed to the president that his chance of success was only 5, maybe 10%, which Stepien explained to the committee was a very, very bleak assessment. In retrospect, the campaign's estimate of a 5 to 10% chance of winning as of November 7th was far too optimistic. In one of the most favorable possible scenarios, for example, President Trump and his team would need to win recounts in Arizona and Georgia, while also prevailing in litigation challenging absentee or vote by mail ballots in Wisconsin or possibly Michigan and Pennsylvania. Fucking mumble mouth. Possibly Michigan or Pennsylvania. But the election wasn't even close enough to trigger automatic recounts in Arizona or Georgia. The narrowest margin of total votes between the two candidates was in Arizona, where former Vice President Biden won by more than 10,000 votes. This may seem like a small number of votes, but it was more than enough to avoid an automatic recount, as Benjamin Ginsburg, a longtime Republican elections lawyer, explained to the Select Committee. The 2020 election was not close. Previous campaigns had successfully challenged vote differentials in the hundreds, not thousands of votes. Ginsburg explained, "You just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts." Georgia performed a hand count of all the ballots anyway, confirming within weeks of the election that Biden had won the state. Also, by January 6th, Arizona and New Mexico had conducted statutory post-election audits of voting machines or randomly selected representative samples of ballots at the state or county level that affirmed the accuracy of their election results. Okay. I'm going to read to like this last, to this part here. Chris Stirewalt, who led the elections desk at Fox News at the time, concurred with Ginsburg's analysis, asked what President Trump's odds of victory were. As of November 7th, Stirewalt replied, none. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign continued to crunch the numbers. On the morning of November 12th, Oczechowski circulated among top campaign advisors a presentation describing what happened in each of the battleground states the campaign was moderating. These analysis by the data team examined the turnout and margins of it on a county-by-county basis in a dozen states, while also analyzing demographic changes that impacted the results. Among the states were Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Oczechowski team determined that President Trump lost each of those 6 states because Biden had performed better than President Trump in certain areas like population centers or suburbs. Yet, in the weeks that followed, President Trump and his new legal team, the Clown Car, went to great lengths to challenge the results of the election in those 6 states, spreading multiple conspiracy theories. The voting data told a clear story. President Trump lost. But regardless of the facts, the president had no intention of conceding defeat. On election night, President Trump and Rudy Giuliani agreed that the president should just declare victory, even though he had no basis. For doing so. Giuliani also told the Select Committee that President Trump asked him on November 4th to take over his campaign's legal operation. Giuliani thought that the only way that it would work would be for President to call the existing campaign team to announce Giuliani's takeover because, in Giuliani's words, they're going to be extraordinarily resentful because they don't like me already and I don't trust them. He said that the president agreed. Although Giuliani wouldn't assume leadership of the campaign's legal operations until mid-November, the former New York City mayor quickly began to butt heads with Team Normal. On November 6th, Giuliani and his team met with the Trump campaign's leadership in its headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. Team Normal was not impressed. Stepien told the Select Committee the campaign team was Team Normal was not impressed. Stepien told the Select Committee that the campaign was concerned that Giuliani would be a distraction to them and the president, or to President Trump. When Giuliani suggested traveling to Pennsylvania to assist the campaign's efforts, the campaign team didn't dissuade him from doing so. After just 10 to 15 minutes in the conference room, Stepien and other staffers left the meeting. That same day, President Trump discussed the campaign's legal strategy in the Oval Office with Giuliani, Clark, and Matt Morgan, the Trump campaign's general counsel. Prior to the election, Morgan was responsible for the campaign litigation strategy. So, so Matt Morgan. Okay. Morgan and his team filed lawsuits challenging the changes states made to voting practices during the coronavirus pandemic. Morgan also studied previous elections to determine the types of cases that were likely to succeed. Clark described how the campaign's original legal strategy was based on his general theory for election cases. To look at what do you think, what do you know, and what can you prove, and then determine which cases to file from there. Giuliani had other ideas and advocated to President Trump that he be put in charge of the campaign's legal operation so that he could pursue his preferred strategy. Mr. Giuliani didn't seem bound by those cases or by by those precedents. He felt he could press forward on anything that he thought was wrong with the election and bring a strategy around that, Morgan explained. Thought he was wrong with the election and bring a strategy around that. Rudy was just chasing ghosts, Clark said. Morgan and Clark excused themselves from the meeting because it was going nowhere. The next day, November 7th, Giuliani held a press conference at Four Seasons Total Landscaping in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He immediately began making outlandish claims, arguing that the Democrats had conspired to steal the election. As you know, from the very beginning, mail-in ballots were a source of some degree of skepticism, if not a lot of skepticism, as being innately prone to fraud, Giuliani said. Those mail-in ballots could have been written the day before the Democratic Party hacks that were all over the convention center. Giuliani offered no evidence to support his shocking and baseless allegation. Echoes of President Trump's relentless campaign against mail-in balloting and his decision to exploit the red mirage were easy to hear. On November 10th, Giuliani and Carrick met with President Trump in the Oval Office to discuss their investigation into voter fraud. White House counsel Pat Cipollone, Cipollone, I think that's how you say it, Cipollone, and White House senior advisor Eric Hirschman were also in attendance. After Giuliani's presentation, President Trump asked Cipollone whether he had spoken to Attorney General Barr about the allegations of fraud. One day before, Barr had issued a memorandum outlining a shift in DOJ policy that allowed federal prosecutors to investigate claims of voting irregularities without waiting for the results to be certified. President Trump's question was an early indication that he was going to pressure the DOJ to endorse his phony fraud claims. Days later, Giuliani and Justin Clark engaged in a screaming match during a meeting in the Oval Office. Giuliani was urging President Trump to file a lawsuit in Georgia, but Clark pointed out that a hand recount was already being conducted and argued it was better to wait. Giuliani told President Trump that Clark was lying to him if formal changing of the guard would follow. On November 14th, President Trump announced on Twitter that Giuliani was now the head of his campaign's legal team. Team Normal saw drastic changes to their roles on the newly structured campaign. See, I didn't know that. And he literally formally Trump just went out. I was like, "Hey, this is the new guy now." That's kind of crazy. On November 14th, President Trump announced on Twitter that, Strict campaign team, some self-imposed and many outside law firms had signed up to support the campaign's legal efforts, disengaged completely. I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time. Stepien explained, "This wasn't a fight that I was comfortable with," he added. On the day the leadership change was announced, Giuliani participated in a surrogate briefing to coordinate messaging by Trump loyalists during their media appearances. Giuliani announced that the messaging strategy should be to go hard on Dominion, Smartmatic, bringing up Chavez and Maduro. Giuliani claimed that additional lawsuits would soon be filed to invalidate upwards of 1 million ballots. Consistent with the messaging advanced by a new campaign team, President Trump in mid-November remained dug in, still refusing to concede defeat. President Trump continued to insist that he was cheated out of the victory, endorsing one wild conspiracy theory after another to deny the simple fact that he lost. Okay, the next part is Trump had his day in court. But I'll leave it there. I'm at 1.7. That's the part I'm at. This is page... Hold up. I always like to do this at the end of a reading session. Just write down the page I'm at. 36. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna keep reading through this, but I don't know if they'll do it all on stream. Parts of it might be on stream, parts of it might be off. So, I don't know. We'll see. Because it's always one thing to read it in your head versus like reading it out loud and everything. So sometimes I feel like I can like focus on it better when I'm not streaming. And sometimes I feel like streaming pushes me to like read more or read for longer or whatever. So I don't know. But yeah, that's it for now. I don't know what the next when the next gaming stream will be. Probably won't be one tomorrow. It might just be more reading tomorrow if I do stream. Or maybe it'll be, I don't know. We'll see. Trying to, again, I think I said it a while ago, but I'm trying to make it an effort to like stream pretty much every day. So that's what I'm trying to do. Try to stick with it. That's it for now. Rockleman will return. Actually, no, I'm looking at this again as well. I'm already pretty close to being done with that section. Yeah, I'm already really close to being done with that. So, that first section. Okay, anyway, I'll see you guys around. Don't die, be safe, and have a good day.